The Atlanta Falcons just made another interesting roster move, and honestly, it's the kind of move that kind of fits the theme of what we've seen all year. Fill-ins, band-aids, little patches here and there, nothing major, nothing flashy, just trying to keep things together week by week. But today's move was actually a little more interesting than the rest, so we're going to talk about that in the video. Now, two roster moves that happened today. One of them you probably expected, but the other one, not so much. Now let's start with the obvious one. The Atlanta Falcons have officially signed kicker Zane Gonzalez. That shouldn't be a surprise to anyone. Earlier this week, the team released Parker Romo, and we all know why. He missed the extra point at the end of the game that ended up costing Atlanta the game against New England. They essentially needed a kicker, plain and simple, and Zane Gonzalez was the next man up. Now it is official. The Falcons announced it. It's on their media channels, and Gonzalez is now a part of that 53-man roster. So that part was expected. But the surprise came with what they had to do to make that move happen. Because in order to sign Zane Gonzalez, the Falcons had to cut someone, and that someone was defensive lineman Taquan Graham. Yeah, that one caught me off guard, and a lot of Falcons fans caught them off guard a bit. Just for some context, Graham was one of the few remaining players from the 2021 draft class, which, let's be honest, hasn't really aged well. Now, he was a fifth-round pick, a solid run stopper, and a player a lot of people would assume would have stayed on the roster because of how reliable he had been early in that role. But there are two things that worked against him. First, availability. The best ability, we all know, is availability. And he has simply not been able to stay healthy. And the second, the Atlanta Falcons defensive line has suddenly become really deep. Now let's go back a little bit. Graham was really productive in 2022 and 2023. He was that consistent 15 to 20 snap guy. He was consistently strong against the run, and occasionally he made a few plays as a pass rusher. I think he even had like 8 QB hits in limited reps, which is really solid for a rotational guy. But over the past 2 seasons, his role has simply just disappeared. Injuries have piled up for him, coaching staffs have changed, and Graham never really had the chance to prove himself to this current regime. Meanwhile, other guys have simply stepped up. We see LaCale London, who has been a solid rotational piece, and then Sam Roberts, who the Falcons stole off the Panthers practice squad. He's actually been making a noticeable impact in early down situations. So when you look at the group, David Onyemata, Sam Roberts, LaCale London, and then you factor in some of those edge guys who can shift inside on passing downs, there just wasn't room left for Taquan Graham. Now, it's sad to see because he's a good player, and when healthy, he is a strong run defender. But it's just one of those cases where the roster numbers don't work out in your favor. Now, I don't think Graham will have to wait a long time to find a new home, unfortunately, for the Falcons. He's shown enough on tape to land somewhere pretty quickly, but this move tells you a lot about what the Falcons are and where they're mentally headed right now. Number one, it tells you that 2021 draft class has simply not aged well at all. Most of those guys are gone. And number two, it shows that the Falcons at 3-5 don't really have the flexibility to make a lot of splash moves. They're just shuffling pieces around, trying to find short-term solutions wherever they can. And for those wondering, wait, didn't they open up a roster spot when they released Parker Romo? Yes, they did. But that spot was already filled when they signed Andrew Stober to the active roster earlier this week. They essentially needed an offensive guard because both Chris Lindstrom and Matthew Bergeron are dealing with injuries. So essentially, that meant the Falcons needed to free up another roster spot for Zane Gonzalez, and Taquan Graham was the odd man out. Now, to me personally, this feels like another Band-Aid type of move. The Falcons are clearly trying to patch holes and stay competitive while they figure out what's next. I also think that this shows that the coaching staff and front office truly still believe that they can win games with this group. They're just making little tweaks to keep things somewhat stable. Now, whether this works or not, we will see. But I think cutting Taquan Graham really says two big things. One, the Falcons are actually deep at interior defensive line, which is crazy to consider, essentially because they lost Grady Jarrett last year. And two, This coaching staff still believes in the players that they have in the room, and they believe that they are good enough to stay competitive. I'm not totally sure if I agree with that statement, but that's the message this move sends. So yes, Zane Gonzalez has officially signed with the Atlanta Falcons. Daquan Graham has officially been released, and Andrew Stuber is still on the roster for guard depth, meaning that one or two of those guys will be out. Now, there's a few moving pieces, but overall, the Falcons have been keep on doing what they've been doing all year, making safe, small, let's hold it together type of moves, and we'll see if it's enough against the Colts this weekend. But I'm not holding my breath at all. Anyway, that's the latest update from Flowery Branch. If you enjoyed this video, please do me a favor, hit the thumbs up, subscribe, and turn on post notifications. And if you want to see more videos like this, check this one out right here. And like always, peace.